Okay, so I'm going to give it a shot. It says I have just under 2 gigs, so we'll see if it'll record. Worst case is it doesn't record, but at least then we will have gone through so you guys can get going. So for exercise 225, we're just flipping to the outside. So there's not that much that I have to go over, other than this is a perfect opportunity for me to go off on tangents and show you how to model random stuff like pools, because why not? But I do want to cover a couple things, and one of the things that I'll cover today is rectangular lights, because thus far we haven't ever done rectangular lights, and I think it's important because they do have a use. The reason that I haven't emphasized them much is because it's really hard for me to give you scripted settings, like, oh, you just set the wattage to this and it's going to turn out right. It's dependent on the size of the rectangle as to how much power, the watts for the light, and so it's a lot of experimentation as we go forward. So anyway, in terms of thinking about the exterior of the building, when we do the rendering from the outside, we want to think about what are we going to see in this exterior view? How do we show our building in its best context? Obviously, if we did a rendering right now, we'd have light that's inside because we already installed the lights on the inside that would be spilling out the windows. One of the problems that people run into in the renderings, though, is that there's no surface outside the window for the light to spill out onto. So having a patio or a deck or something that you can include as part of the render makes the exterior night rendering better, because then there's something to reflect on. If your building is plunked down in the middle of a bunch of grass and you're trying to render out, a night scene where you're casting shadows on grass, it never turns out quite that good. So having some kind of a solid surface to cast the shadow on can help. The other strategy that people have used before is to set their angle such that you're looking mostly up toward the sky. So you're setting a low angle looking up, and then providing some kind of exterior lighting for your building as a whole. So when we think about the building and how are we going to light it from the outside, you have to think about those kinds of things. Is it only going to be a rendering that shows light coming out through the windows, or are we going to put some outside light fixtures in? Are we going to put some outside lights? And what is that going to look like? Do we want the whole surface of the building to be illuminated? Do we want the building to stand out in the surrounding context? Do we want spotlights on the building? You have that option. You can decide, is that appropriate for your type of building? One of the things that people have done in the past is they've done subtle lighting, kind of washing down the surface of a wall or a building, and that's where a rectangular light can be particularly useful. And so in this context here, I'm going to put one underneath this lip right there on the edge of my building. And in this area, I'm going to assume that the fixture itself is unseen. So it's a hidden fixture. So I'm just going to put the V-Ray light in. And to do it, I'm going to do a rectangular light, a V-Ray rectangular light. It's the second one over in your toolbar. And when I click on it, it's going to ask me for a corner. And so I could do, say, this corner. And then it's going to ask me for an opposite corner. So I could do maybe, it's going to ask me for a length. So that would be the length right there. And then it's asking me for the opposite corner. So when I do that, I create a really long light strip. This strip then has a normal on it, so an arrow on it that shows the direction that the light is going to be cast. If it's backwards, you can type flip, and it will go the opposite direction. In my case, it was going the right direction, so I didn't need to do that, but I wanted to point that out. Same rules apply, though, with this light as the other lights. Let me switch, since I'm back outside, let me switch into a 28 millimeter camera view. I get less distortion that way. And when I have this, I want to make sure that it's not intersecting any object. Right now it's coplanar with that ledge on the side of my building. So let me move it just a little bit. We'll do vertically by maybe a ½ inch. Could be a ¼ inch. Doesn't matter. Just as long as it's, sorry, should have been negative. One more time. Sorry, it should have been negative. And then it needs to be moved away from the building just a little bit. So that it is floating right out in front of the building. Now, when I look at the rectangular light itself, again, the settings are based on the proportions of the light, and the size of the light. And so there probably is some mathematical way of finding out what that should be. But for me, the easiest way is to just do some guessing. So I'll set this up. We'll do the color first. So I've got 255, 214, 170 for my color. I'm going to go back into watts, and I'm going to guess at about 100 for right now over the course of this light. Now, we have a couple other things that happen that are different than the other lights that we've seen so far. Do we want the light to be double-sided? Does it go in both directions or only one? I'm going to leave it only one. And do we want the light to be invisible? So this is the only V-ray light where if we don't check this box, you'll actually see the V-ray light source. So you'll see a white rectangle that is the light. So I'm going to make it invisible because I don't want to see that little light source. The rest of these options should be just fine as they are. And at this point, it's a matter of trying it out and seeing does it work. So I'm going to leave myself in that position, maybe about like this, kind of looking up at it. I'm going to go into my rendering options here. These are the same settings from last class because I already did the night rendering for the interior. Let me go into my output and adjust my size down to maybe like 100. And then we'll do a quick render and see what happens. So this is also the time in the semester where we're going to have these kinds of things. I have to do a render. It's going to take a little bit of time while it populates the render. And you guys have to be patient and watch it. So you can already see in the night render, we're seeing the sky in the background, but I'm getting a nice strip of light that's on the building there. This is probably enough glow for kind of what I was looking for. And again, I guessed at 100, but sometimes you have to make adjustments. So maybe 100 wasn't enough, you up that and you get a little bit higher resolution on your render. So the other option, if you didn't want to do something like that on your building, you could, sorry, I'm going back and forth between SketchUp. It's going to screw me up. I'm going to middle mouse and right click and anyway. Is we could do a spotlight maybe from some kind of a light fixture here on the deck shining up at the building. So I could go in and I could create a spotlight. There, we'll say the same proportions that we've done before. So my radius, sorry, would be 1 foot. That was not correct. Let's try that one more time. 1 foot. And this would also be 1 foot. But I kind of want it pointing down. So something like that. I may have to do some rotations to get this in the correct orientation. So let's move it over so that it's not directly in that surface. Let's move it over a little bit more this direction. Maybe to there. It's a little too steep, I think, so I need to tip it over a little bit. So let me rotate 3D, or I could actually just do a regular rotate in one of the side views. It's probably an easier way of doing it. So let me work in the side view for just a second. Let me rotate. Maybe more like that. And again, you'll have to experiment to see what the right angle is for something like that. Then I'll go ahead and try this light out. So let's come over here and let's adjust the properties. There's my light, 255, 214, 170. This is going to be in watts. It's going to be inverse square. And the rest of this is all fine. Then once again, I'll have to come back in to my scene here and do a render and see, does it look right? Is it too much power or not enough power? And it will probably take several of these lights going along the back sides of those posts, for example, to figure out what's right. Right. So you can see the bar rather easily, and you can see that there's a little bit of a wash. I can see it better on my screen against the building. Okay, that seems reasonable. So if I wanted that to kind of populate throughout the building, right, I could take it from this one post and I could copy it along. In an ideal world, I would make the geometry that would hold that light fixture so it would be there, but I don't want to spend the time doing it, and it's going to be hidden from view when I do the rendering anyway, so it's not the end of the world. So I have those lights installed. So once I get the view the way I want it, the lights installed the way I want it, then it's really a matter of figuring out what's the view that you want to see. You know, what shows me enough of the building. You know, maybe I want to be looking from down here up at the building. I don't know. You have to figure out what's the right piece. So from there, once you have the piece, you save your view and you do your exterior rendering. That's essentially all that's required in terms of today. Some exterior light fixtures, and then we do the exterior rendering. But like I said, I have a little bit of time, so I'm going to play around and show you some different things. The one thing that people have a tendency to ask for is, how do I do water and or a pool and or a hot tub or those kinds of things? So I figure it's worth at least showing you that. So I'm going to add a pool over in this section right here. Actually, just for fun, I'm going to put it up over here. I've done it down over here before too many times. So I'm going to do it up over in this corner. So there'll be a pool that's out here. So in order to do that, though, I have to go back to my original base retreat file, which is here, and start to add that piece into the geometry that's here. So I have the hillside coming down and wrapping around this part of the building there. In terms of where the pool really belongs, I don't know. We'll put it right in here on this upper floor. Why not? So first off, I need to create the geometry to hold the pool. So that's rather simple. I'll go ahead and just create some walls here. Let me use the rectangle. And sometimes when I'm doing this, when I don't exactly know what size I want just yet, I'll make the box bigger than I intend it to be, something like this. And then I'll do some scaling. So I'll do a scale 1D. And you know, maybe this really needs to be, let me turn off my center snap here, a foot thick. So we'll say 1 foot. Let me figure out, I don't know off the top of my head what the distance is from here to there. I need to make sure this is, in fact, big enough to be a hot tub or something. All right, it could be a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and move this all the way over to this edge. So I'll move it to right there. Then I'll move and create one more block that's over on this side. Scale 1D. One foot. And that's essentially giving me the walls of my pool here. A little bit of coping. I can take these. Let me just copy them. And I'll put it there. And then I'll take these two and I'll rotate them. .180 so that they go there. One. So I have those little pieces. I probably need to do some cleaning up here because they're not quite right. There we go. And since they overlap, I'm just going to take this and this, and I'll join them together in a union so that they become one. Likewise, I'll take this one, and I'll join those together into a union. Something like that. These pieces on the outside here, those little glass panels, they don't matter anymore because I've put in a wall. So let me do a quick scale 1D so that this comes back and fills in just that little piece. Okay, so now I have this with kind of a border and what's inside the pool. Now, normal pools have a slope to them on the inside, and obviously I made this out of straight walls. So if I really wanted it to be a true pool, I would need to model a little bit more of that. But for the angles that I'm going to view, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. But I do need to start to think about what's happening that represents the surface of the water. So a couple things about a pool. One, there's usually some kind of a tile coping that goes around the outside. So I probably need something that represents that. So let me create a quick plane here. Just a rectangle. Let me move that down so that it's at the bottom of the coping. And then we'll move it down another 6 inches from there. Oops. It would be helpful if I put in my negative. There we go. Now that I have that, I'll take this plane and I'm going to intersect these objects. Which is going to give me some lines, most of which I don't care about. I'm going to deselect the 4 that go right around the pool there, and then I'll get rid of those other pieces. Now I can take these lines, take this actually, and I'm going to split this shape with that object, which gives me an upper and a lower, and lets me change the material for the upper and for the lower. So I'll do the same thing with these other pieces, there, there, and there. And we're going to split with these curves. Perfect. So now we have, now, you get the idea. It didn't like me. Let me just split with this instead. See if we can get it. There we go. That one worked. That one worked. Split with that. Perfect. So then these upper ones, if I can select them, I can explode them and assign the inside one to a tile. So let me take each of those, let me explode, and I'll take the inner surface all the way around. Without that. And those all need to become some kind of tile. So I can load in, let me go into my materials, and let me go ahead and load maybe a blue porcelain or something. There's a blue porcelain. I'll go ahead and load that. I'm just making sure I get the white one. Yeah. So there's the blue porcelain. I'll apply it to, in this case, I have it selected, so I'll apply it to the selection. And so now that has the tile been applied to it. This surface I can ultimately turn into the water itself. It's too big right now, so I'm going to have to trim it off. Let me move it up by 3 inches, because it's at the bottom of the tile. And let me go ahead and use these surfaces again. To trim that surface. So I'll type trim. And we'll get rid of that pool surface. I think it's all the way around now. So there it is. That would be the water. So now I just need the actual pool surface itself, or the material. So I'll go into my materials, and I'm going to load a material for water. I'll go into load material, and I'll go into water. And I have several different size water. I have the lake water, which you'd be using for Lake Tahoe. I have the ocean water. We're going to use the fountain water because it's a smaller scale. So I'll go into fountain. I'll load the fountain water. And I'll take that fountain water and I'm going to apply it to that selection. So now I have the water on it. I still need to think about the material that's on the inside of the pool too. So I forget what material I have on these walls, but let's take these lower walls here and explode and take the innermost surfaces. And for lack of something better, I'll just put like a concrete on them. There's a basic concrete, apply material to selection. I could pick a different material itself. So all of that is now ready for its rendering. Looks like that didn't quite line up correctly. Well, we'll leave it like that for right now. I have a little issue on the top there. So it's ready to render, but I need some light in this pool if I'm gonna render the pool. So I need to save this, go back to my master site file, and then put the rectangular light in. So I'll go ahead and go to File and then Save. And we'll jump over into my master site. I'll go back to my blocks. So I'll go to Block Manager. And I'll update my base here. Give it a second. Perfect. And yeah, there's my pool. It's made its way in. Okay? So now, though, I need to put that light in that I was talking about. So I'm going to use that rectangular light again. And so I'll make it the same size as the pool. From right there. Right there. And we'll come across. The light should be pointing up.